Bear with me for a moment. I think everyone is here for the most part. Thank you to our audience who came on time as well. All right, I think we could go ahead and kick off. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. My name is Sue. I'm the program manager at the Asia Democracy Network, and I welcome you to the second Asia Democracy Assembly. Before we start, ADN, we create these platforms and spaces so that multi-stakeholders from across the region could come together to speak about democracy, discuss democracy and human rights, and how we could better it for our region. Before we start, I do have some announcements for you. For all of you who's joining us on Zoom, and also live via Facebook and YouTube. We want to engage with you as much as possible. And to do so, we want to hear from you. So what we will be doing is using a tool called Mentimeter. Let me show it to you here. Here we go. So throughout the whole process, you'll hear different discussions, speakers, and we want to hear your thoughts on the topic. You go to www.menti.com, put in code 5610192, and then you'll be able to answer some of the questions we have for you. It's very brief. And then, we want to hear from you and your thoughts, and hopefully we could interact with you in that way. So please utilize that as much as possible. And we'll go ahead and kick off then. I will hand off the floor to the Secretary General of ADN, Mr. Ichar Supriyadi, to go ahead and start the session. Ichar, the floor is yours.
Okay, check. So the voice is okay, right? All right, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Greetings and welcome to the Asia Democracy Assembly 2021. My name is Ichal Supriyadi, the Secretary General of the Asia Democracy Network. And on behalf of the organization and its members, I would like to thank esteemed friends, colleagues, and dignitaries for attending these events. Previously, this event was held every 2 years and called as the Asia Democracy Consolidation Forum, but now changed to be Democracy Assembly to contextualize the current situation and addressing the need and conditions will be held annually. The overall objective of the event today is to continuously strengthen unity and solidarity and renewing commitments of the democratic actors to protect and defend democracy in Asia, and then continuously to discuss a roadmap and offer navigation in pushback and confront democracy regressions. The roadmap of this assembly was started far before today. It was started since August. We conducting different consultations in sub-regional level. That were held on August 10 to 12, and then continue with a special session to discuss situation in Myanmar, Afghanistan, and addressing specific issue toward the rise of illiberal power in Asia, as well as organize sessions on democracy and discriminations on work and decence, which is held on early this November. The finding summary will be presented at the plenary 2 on this event. I think the overall of the proceedings is designed to come with the conclusions on what should be done to deepening democracy and to confront all the challenges. Despite we already discussed so many in so many forums about the challenges, I think this is a time for us to looking a way forward to deepening democracy or to confront the challenges. The overall session will be divided to be 3 plenaries. Today, we will hear the keynote speech and then report and share finding, as well as the response from the multi-democracy actors that representing by a few speakers in the plenary 1 and 2. And tomorrow, we will formulate action to confront regression through different breakout sessions. We're going to start with the openings, and then the proceeding will be continue with the official welcome from ADNs. And it is privileged to have a senior advisors and acting co-chairs of ADN to mark the openings. Then continue the keynote speech from a prominent scholars and prominent democracy leaders and Nobel Peace Laureate to address democracy regression and the way forward to deepening democracy. Without further ado, I would like to call acting co-chairs of ADN, Gus Miklat. In my hand, I have a long, brief introduction about him, but he's just recently elected to be acting co-chairs of ADNs, and he leads the organization called the Initiative for International Dialogues with robust advocacy, conflict prevention, and solidarity organization based in the Philippines, with a campaign and program on peace building and democracy in South Asia at large, and particularly on Burma, Mindanao, South Thailand, and Timor-Leste, including in Aceh and West Papua. So I think everybody knows Gus. To save the times, I will give the floor to Gus Miklat. Gus.
Thank you, Ichal, for that kind introduction. Fellow Democrats, good afternoon, and for those who are in a different time zone, good morning and good evening, as it may be. On behalf of the Asia Democracy Network, of which my organization, the Initiatives for International Dialogue, and our allied network, the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict, belong to, I am very honored to officially welcome all of you to our third General Assembly. The last one we had was in Malaysia in 2019, when we were all giddy from the monumental political shift to a more democratic arrangement in that country. Yet only 2 years after, we are confronted anew with some of the same challenges that buffeted us there before. While we would have preferred to be in one place for this assembly to reconnect and listen intently to each other, I'm sure we have become savvier and veterans in the various online encounters we've had these recent years. I'm also sure we will still be able to deepen our bonds. It's been more than 2 years since the pandemic has fundamentally changed our lives. For most of us, our health, both physical and mental, have become our primary concern. Even as activists and advocates who have been incessantly struggling for the rights of our peoples, we had to take care first of our own well-being in order for our accompaniment of our people's struggles to be more effective and thus help safeguard their welfare and dignity. Our ways of work have been upended. Never have we been both disconnected and connected at the same time. We have become accessible through countless online platforms like this one. But some of our profound partnerships and even relationships were affected, with not a few even broken, in the absence of immediate physical engagement and the intimacy necessary to deepen them. Around the region, the pandemic has become a pretext of some states, especially those ruled by tyrants, populists, and juntas, to crack down on peaceful dissent and further contract already shrinking civic spaces. Dialogue, civil engagement, and asserting our basic human and democratic rights have become even doubly difficult in the time of COVID. Yet, civil society have tirelessly asserted itself. The region's civil society especially remains vibrant. After also being initially unhinged by the virus, we have rebounded and regrouped in a more creative manner. We have become more flexible, and we have also raised our militants to a higher level. Thus, we count our blessings. People's networks and coalitions have sprouted all around the region and the globe to unite not only to push back the shriveling democratic spaces, but to offer and uphold alternatives to the dominant narratives of failed and undemocratic government policies. Civil society and Democrats have coalesced in addressing the assaults to democracy and the pandemic by setting up community pantries, spreading vital information to the public, calling out questionable processes, to combating draconian policies, and even a brutal and illegal military junta that have turned back the currents of democracy in Burma, Myanmar. What is outstanding is that civil society and Democrats have done all this along with cohorts and champions in policy circles, the academe, multilaterals, the donor community, and even within some governments. I am proud and humbled to say that the Asia Democracy Network and its members have been in the forefront of these battles, most of the time quietly, and at sometimes loudly. I am sure that this assembly will help us consolidate our gains as we reflect also on new learnings we have for each other. Let us thus commit to sustain and defend this platform in conjunction with kindred ones as we collectively gather the scattered ripples of fairness and consensus into a tidal wave of democracy in Asia. I thank our esteemed speakers, including my good friend and compadre, His Excellency Jose Ramos Horta, for gracing and honoring us today, despite your own very busy schedules. And our dear participants who have been unremitting in your commitment to democracy in your own little or big ways. Lastly, I thank our Secretariat, led by our Secretary General, Ichal Supiardi, and our Program Manager, Suyon So, who have ably shepherded our network amid these trying, yet hopefully liberating times. I also salute my colleagues in the steering committee of the ADN. I wish us a successful assembly. Thank you very much. A luta continua.
A luta continua. This is the very nice closing, actually, Gus, with a luta continua. Okay, to accompany the welcome remark from ADNs, I would like to invite Dr. Nimalka Fernando. She's the co-chairperson of the International Movement Against All Forms of Discrimination and Racism, and a director of the Women Political Academy in Sri Lanka. So she is a senior advisor within ADNs, and then she is a lawyer by profession. Dr. Nimalka, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me to join you and also extend my very warm welcome. I live in South Asia and these greetings come from our region. To all our colleagues and activists who have joined this gathering. As Gus said, yes, it's strange time. We are meeting virtually. We are unable to hold each other's hands in solidarity. But at the same time, hats off to ADN for keeping this union together through these kind of efforts. And I'm so happy to be able to greet everybody and to be able to capture the spirit that we all affirm, the spirit of democracy, even during this troubled time. The pandemic has affected our lives, our looks, our whole outlook to life. At times we are not sure whether we will be alive tomorrow. We have lost friends, dear friends, who inspired us in our journey for democracy and justice. We mourn, but at the same time, we celebrate their lives. Struggling for COVID and struggling against COVID has also not been a health issue, like Gus reminded us. In the face of COVID pandemic, regulations managing COVID has brought in a sense of securitization in our world. In Sri Lanka, we have experienced that. Minorities faced insecurity while the authorities were unable to deal with specificity, especially the Muslim minority in Sri Lanka, with regard to whether we are going to burn their bodies or whether we are going to bury. So COVID brought in the hidden violations that the minorities have faced. If we had thought it's health, but it surfaced. The Dalits in India, suddenly we find our space restricted. We are not on the streets. Our struggle is virtually. Our struggle is through our resistance, through research, through communiques. We also see the increase of controlling of social media. We've seen the restrictions of demonstrations using health regulations, especially in a country like Sri Lanka. We've seen that. We've seen increase of women's violence, especially domestic violence. If we have thought that this pandemic would bring humanity, human protection, we are daily struggling once again, for protection. What happened in Afghanistan has brought us challenges in relation to international relations and solidarity. We in South Asia and Asia and internationally, we are looking at Afghanistan with a sense of deep concern in relation to democracy and rights of women. So we are meeting in very strange time, even though it's health issue, authoritarianism, militarization, and juntas have emerged and re-emerged, captured even the little space that we were enjoying. So therefore, it is time for us, and I'm very glad that we are meeting to recapture our energies, to keep that flame of resistance amongst us. And I wish at this moment to salute the farmers in India. They have won. And I also wish to salute the teachers' trade union in Sri Lanka. Despite COVID, they were on the streets. We were quite concerned, but they were on the streets. And these struggles still inspire us. Let us, through these 2 days, we know we will not be able to capture the same way like in a physical meeting, but I call upon all of us to reaffirm, to rededicate, to uphold democracy, continue in our activism, having faith in the struggles of the people of Asia who inspired us. People in Nepal, Thailand, Burma, Philippines, Japan, South Korea, Sri Lanka, these are the people who inspired us. This is activism that brought us together, and that is the democracy we are talking about. COVID, post-COVID, pre-COVID, our lives have to be touched with the clarion call for democracy and rule of law and right to life and gender justice and environmental protection, sustainable environment in Asia. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, Nimalka. Very wide, short but deep discussion about struggle in South Asia. Next, we're going to see the video messages from Dr. Andrew J. Nathan. He's the professor of political science at Columbia University. He studies the politic and foreign policy of China, political participations, and political culture in Asia, and the international human rights regimes. He wrote a lot of books. I think there's too long list to mention here. He's now served at the Columbia University as a director of the Weatherhead East Asia Institute and as a chair of the Political Science Department. He is also chair of the Morningside Institutional Review Board, IRB. And then off campus, he's a member of the Board of Human Rights in China and a former board member of the National Endowment for Democracy and Freedom House. He's the regular Asia and Pacific Book Review for Foreign Affairs. So the operators.
Yeah, I'm so pleased to be here to give an opening talk to your Democracy Assembly for 2021, Confronting Democratic Regression and Claiming Civic Space. The reason that I'm here to speak with you is that we know that the problems of democratic recession are not only in Asia, but they are global. And the forces behind this recession are also global. There are many forces, but among them, the rise of China, the decline of American power, the reaction in many countries to the flood of refugees that are coming from troubled regions, and the failure of the democracies to use social programs to ease the impact of economic globalization on disadvantaged groups in those societies, giving rise to populist authoritarian reactions. But you know all that. You've been analyzing that in your sub-regional meetings, and you don't need me to analyze the recession. What I want to talk about is the global character of the democracy movement. It's not only local, it's not only Asian, but it is a global movement. The dynamic of this global democracy movement comes from individuals like you, courageous individuals who are committed to individual freedom, the right to think, the right to speak, and who want to be treated with dignity by their own governments. People like you are driving this global democracy movement in various regions of the world. At Columbia, I teach an introduction to human rights class, and one of the subjects that we confront is the subject of so-called cultural relativism, or the Asian values thesis. The argument that human rights and democracy are Western ideas that are not valued in other regions. And my students, who are, good kids, worry whether they, in studying and participating in the human rights movement, are engaging in a kind of contemporary neo-colonialism to force Western values on other societies. And with what's happening in Afghanistan right now, the victory of the Taliban, one of the interpretations of what went on is that Afghan culture doesn't support human rights and democracy, and that the effort to implant those values in Afghanistan was a failed foreign effort, a Western cultural imposition. But no, that's not the case. We see from the throngs at the airport, and let me take a moment to acknowledge the tragedy of the Balixed evacuation effort and the terrorist episode at the airport. But we see from the people thronging the airport and others resisting the Taliban within Afghan society that Afghan people are no different from people anyplace else in their fundamental desire for individual freedom to think and speak and write, and to be treated with dignity by those in authority. Your network, the Asia Democracy Network, is the strongest proof, which I cite to my students, that the values of human rights and democracy are not just Western. They really are universal. They are just as Asian as they are Western. Now, I don't mean by that any specific form of democracy. Certainly the American form has shown many, many flaws. in the recent several years. And I don't mean any specific interpretation either of the freedoms of speech and thought or religion, things like that. So we have rather unusual interpretation of the freedom of speech. Our First Amendment jurisprudence in the United States is distinctive. It's different from any other society. What I mean by universal are the universal deep human needs for dignity and for individual autonomy, for the right to be safe from arbitrary oppression, for the right to learn, to be curious, to inquire, to think, for the right to be treated with respect. We can see many places in the world where people temporarily are afraid to demand these rights because they've been hurt, they've been scared, they have submitted, and it may look as if they don't care about those things. But we know that's not true. We see that sooner or later, there's an upwelling of resistance to oppression, whether it's in Hong Kong, whether in Myanmar, in Xinjiang in China, or many other places in Asia and beyond Asia. Those of you who are on the front lines of these struggles in various places are tremendously brave, in many cases taking tremendous risks. We admire you very much for doing so. We probably wouldn't have the courage. I wouldn't have the courage to do the same things that you're doing if I were confronted with the same challenges that you're confronted with, but I am very, very happy to be able to support you in what you're doing and to cheer you on and to express my respect. We know that the demand for democracy and human rights springs from the individual need for freedom and dignity, but the individual has a hard time operating alone. The single individual is a target for the regime. The individual needs the support of a network, and that's what you are doing. You are building a network. The network is important, first of all, because it provides emotional support for those individuals who are so brave. Beyond that, the network can provide all kinds of practical help, and sometimes those of us outside of Asia are in a position to provide some small amount of practical help, whether it's asylum, whether it's a fellowship, whether it's some kind of support for an organization, whether it's technical assistance of various kinds. The practical help from the network is very important to encourage and empower the individual. The network and the individual together keep alive the possibility of change. Sooner or later, change happens. This is a very difficult battle. I know that. We all know that. You know it better than I do. It's not a one-shot battle. It's not one where the good guys, which is us, achieve an easy victory by the end of the movie. It doesn't work that way because the forces of authoritarianism are also permanent, really. Well, we have to admit they're permanent. The urge, the impulse toward authoritarianism never goes away. Some people who are politicians or who go into power just want to control everything. Some people who go into power actually are trying to do something good, but they still want to control things in order to get what they think is a good thing to be done. So the urge for power to control people, politics in essence, is control. That never goes away. And so the fight against it, the fight to resist, the fight to protect the individual from that other human impulse for power, that also is permanent. It's a long, long battle, and one that doesn't ever really end. And we may feel that we're the weaker side in this battle because the other side has power, but what we have are the basic impulses of human nature. The forces on our side in the long run are so resilient, they can never go away, and so deeply built into human nature that they never go away. So we don't know when and we don't know how, but in the long run, every authoritarian regime runs into some kind of trouble in the face of human nature. and becomes unsustainable. And so change in the direction of democracy and human rights does happen as constantly as the pushback from the other side happens. And it's important. So as you open up your meeting, I want to express our support in the global network, which I've already mentioned, and my great faith in you, my faith in your commitment, in your courage, your intelligence, your ability to figure out how to face the complex problems that you're facing today in Asia, to figure out how to build your network, how to unite with one another, how to support each other, and how to reach out and tell us in the global network what we can do to help you. I'm here basically to assure you of our tremendous respect and for our support for you. And I want to thank you for the honor of having been invited to give this speech. It makes me feel very encouraged to see that you're holding this meeting. So my best wishes for the meeting, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Andrew Nathan, for the insight, brilliant insight, and also the encouragement and support to the global movement and also the regional movements. So next speakers, who is live and then will speak live directly in the Zoom rooms, Dr. Jose Manuel Ramos Horta. He's the 1996 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, and then former president of Timor-Leste, and also was appointed as a United Nations Special Representative and head of the United Nations Integrated Peace Building Office in Guinea-Bissau, or UNIOP-BIS. So I think that is three most easy spell about his long list of biodata. Dr. Horta, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you may be. It's a pleasure to join you today with just few reflections and observations. It's not a speech. I have some notes, but I will have to start from my own country. And I would say with some pride in that the numerous multiple challenges we face from day one of independence in 2002, challenges of healing the wounds of the people, of the soul, of the heart, of the body, challenge of rebuilding physically the country from the ashes of the violence of '99, and at the same time walking halfway to normalize relations with Indonesia. And the post-war to Indonesia responded positively, and ever since, there are no two countries in Asia that have better relations than Timor-Leste and Indonesia. We know how across Asia, sometimes in spite of the countries being members of the same regional organization, they have unresolved land border disputes. They have historical rivalries, some dating back to World War II, Korea, Japan, China, Japan, India, Pakistan, China, India, and so on and so on, exacerbated by the rising of China and the temptation of a rising power to assert itself. And China expand its maritime boundary to the 9-dash line, and with multiple overlapping claims, and with extra regional powers increasing their own military presence to challenge the Chinese claims on almost the entire South China Sea. And we see an elderly European power, United Kingdom, United States, Australia, coming together in a new security arrangement, specifically aiming at containing China. The same strategic thinking that goes back to the 60s and didn't contain China. What China was in the 60s, in the beginning of the containment, and what China is today, is obvious that containment hasn't produced the desired results. So all of this happened at the same time as the pandemic exacerbated an already difficult world economic situation. Because I read papers, studies of the economic conditions in Europe, in the United States before the pandemic. And there were already some very severe, serious warnings about a possible global recession. And then came COVID-19 and accelerated the global recession. And who are the victims of it? The victims are the countries on the countries that never benefited much from globalization, the poorest of the poor that made progress, at least according to the UN, the World Bank data. In the last 20, 30 years, there have been improvements, but hundreds of millions have been thrown back into poverty, into extreme poverty. As my friend Kailash Satyarthi, Nobel Peace Prize, India 2014, I'm the chairman of the steering committee of the Nobel laureates and global leaders on child labor and child slavery. Child labor, child slavery has increased dramatically, and tens of millions of children have not gone back to school since the pandemic. And where is the international solidarity? Where is the humanity that we talk about? We are the same humanity, this common humanity. With Muhammad Yunus, Nobel Peace Prize 2006, we campaigned together to make the vaccine a global common good, so that for once in our lifetime, the powers that be would show humanity and would show wisdom in making the vaccine a common good, free for all. And yet, a pharmaceutical company like Pfizer made in one single year $30 billion. The same pharmaceutical companies and universities that received billions of dollars, either from the United States, from the European Union, from France, to manufacture, to research and find vaccine for humanity. So they didn't spend actually much money of their own. They didn't invest much of their own, except maybe Pfizer, to produce a vaccine that could be made available for the third world, for the poorest countries. Well, this has not happened, is not happening. Yes, we appreciate the effort of COVAX. We appreciate the effort of some countries that have poured money into COVAX, European Union, Australia, Japan, United States. We cannot deny that. But the reality is that while Europeans are already in the third dose, in the booster vaccine, less than 10% of Africa has access to the vaccine. I'm not complaining as an Timorese, because we have make available, we have been helped by Australia, by Portugal, by the European Union, and New Zealand to access vaccines. And the vaccines in Timor-Leste are completely free, including for foreign residents of this country. absolutely zero discrimination. Even if you are here without papers, without documentation, you are, as we call it, illegally. I hate this expression, illegal people. Well, they're human beings. They are legally on this planet. So, and anyway, vaccines free for all of them, including for rich and poor in Timor-Leste. And I have to say the good news in Timor-Leste is that we have had deaths for several weeks from COVID, zero deaths. We have actually now 8 mild active cases, and the majority of the people have been fully vaccinated, and the vaccination campaign is continuing. On the democracy front, I don't know whether quoting Freedom House or any other Western think tank is obligatory, and they make them more credible, because we all tend to do this. We always resort to Western European or American think tanks to validate our status. But anyway, Freedom House at Timor-Leste ranks as #1 democracy in Southeast Asia. Maybe a cynical person with sense of humor would say, and who is the second democratic country in Southeast Asia? Or would add, well, with those kind of neighbors you have, it's not difficult to be #1. And maybe tragically, sadly, it is true because of the setbacks in Southeast Asia, setbacks across Asia. And I have to say, I don't need Freedom House. I don't need any other Western institution to tell me where we are in terms of democracy. But the reality is, in 20 years since independence, we have not failed our constitutional calendar. Elections are held almost mathematically on the 5th year of the previous election. There has not been challenge to election result, even when the gap separating the winner and the loser is very narrow. We are an imperfect democracy, like democracy has shown to be very imperfect. And we have no Timorese president or prime minister has gone to the lengths of Donald Trump to challenge elections. The court validate the election result, and everybody has accepted. Zero pressure, prosecution of our journalists, of our social media, the zero political prisoners, zero torture of anyone, etc., etc. So I'm very proud of our achievement. We are literally an oasis of tranquility, of imperfect democracy, because I'm careful to say it is an imperfect democracy. There have been attempts here in this country to bypass the constitution, to bypass the procedures in the parliament, how a speaker is elected. And there has been an attempt at usurping extra power by some senior leader of the country. But we have a zero political violence. The issue that I wish to talk to you about today, again, as I've done repeatedly, is we must step up the effort in support of the people of Myanmar. There is no greater challenge to democracy today in Southeast Asia, if not in Asia, than the abuse by the Tatmadaw, the Myanmar army, against their own people, against children, women, artists, politicians, elected leaders of Myanmar. I'm pleased to note that Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and have shown courage in blocking invitation to the dictator of the head of the Myanmar army to attend the ASEAN summit. This is unprecedented, and which shows that in spite of the negatives that we are talking about, the other speakers have talked about the setbacks of democracy, actually the position taken by Malaysia, by Singapore, by Indonesia, and even by Vietnam, Philippines, in the vote in the UN General Assembly, for, condemning the coup, well, it shows the extraordinary progress in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN countries, that at least some of them no longer tolerate military incursions into the political arena, overthrowing elected democratic leaders. So congratulations to Indonesia, to Malaysia, to Singapore, to Vietnam, to the Philippines. Although in the Philippines, we know, and my good friend Gus McLeod, who is also my mentor, and Gus is my mentor of more than 20 years. Would tell us how is situation in the Philippines is, but still, I'm more positive, and usually because I have lived through some of the most extraordinary challenges in the last 50 years of humanity's history. I've seen all. And so I would say I'm not in despair. I'm not pessimistic about the current regional and global democracy conditions. Demagogues have a short life. Demagogues that made false promises, demagogues who are false prophets, they have a short life, particularly in this 21st century. I conclude by saying to all of you, Asian Network, Democracy Network, thank you. Some of you, I see some of you, particularly Gus, with gray hair, completely gray hair, from the time when I first met him more than 20 years ago. And thank you for your support for Timor-Leste all these years. Thank you for standing by with the people of Myanmar, who are very much in my heart. I know Myanmar well. The first human rights program, training program conducted in Myanmar ever was done by me in July '94 in Manipur, in the base camp of the Karen National Army. So I'm very familiar with the struggle of the people of Myanmar. In this country, in my home, I receive Dr. Sein Win and many other freedom fighters of Myanmar. So please step up the support to the democracy movement in Myanmar. I thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Dr. Horta, for very for the inspirations speech. Of course, among us, I think in here there is, if you can see the comments or the chats, there's so many people appreciating and really supportive for the Myanmar movement for democracy at the moment of times. Okay. I hope you will be still with us because we are just ending the opening sessions, and then we will take some times for what do you call tributes for one of human rights and then democracy activist who just recently leaving us, and then he's now rest in peace. For doing that, maybe I would like to invite Savina. So Dr. Horta, I wish you can accompany us until the end of the sessions. And of course, we would like to hear more your input or suggestions. Savina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Ichang. This year was quite a difficult one as we lost many of our democracy leaders. Among them, we lost one really dear to our hearts, Chair Chito Gascon. The Asia Democracy Network doesn't have any one particular founder, but it was founded by a group of leading democracy and human rights advocates in Asia. One of those key actors that designed ADN into existence was Chito, and until the end supported us and truly believed in the strength of a regional democracy network. Chair Chito was a mentor, a leader, and an inspiration to us all. This is our dedication to him. Chair Chito, thank you for your service, and we will always keep you alive through the spirit of democracy.
Great. We want to thank Kier, who actually put together that tribute for us. We still can't believe that Chito left us. He was actually supposed to speak on day 2 and really introduce and interact with the youth, and he was so excited to do it. He was looking forward to it, and we're very saddened that he wasn't able to be with us. He will be dearly, dearly missed. So we'll go on and start the plenary sessions, plenary 1. Before we go into that, I want to share again how everyone could interact with us. You could go to menti.com and hit that code 5610192. We want to hear from you, your thoughts, and your perspective on some of the topics that we're discussing today. And then also during the next plenary session, for those of you who are on Zoom, please feel free to raise questions in the Q&A box or the chat box, and we'll be monitoring that. If you're joining us via YouTube or Facebook, you can ask questions here. Also through menti.com, the code is different, 1611218. So without further ado then, plenary one, we will have presentations from two speakers. Basically, what we did prior to the assembly, the Asia Democracy Network conducted 3 sub-regional consultations. We try to reach as many people as we can within our network to bring them together sub-regionally, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Northeast Asia, and have a small group discussion about what some of the challenges are that we're going through, and really what are some actions that we could take together as a region together, and how we can move forward. And based on those, discussions, the results will be reported by Mr. Debendra Adhikari. He's the South Asia Program Manager of Forum Asia. Without further ado, I will give the floor to Debendra.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Shu, for the background on that. So I'm going to present that the kind of, the findings of the sub-regional consultation, which was held in September in the sub-region in Asia. So, Shu, would you like to show your PowerPoint or? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Shu. Then thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I have already mentioned that this is the kind of the findings of the 3 sub-regional consultation, which was held in September in 3 sub-region. And then content for these presentations will be background, and then I will present here Southeast Asia, and Northeast Asia and Central Asia sub-regional consultations finding, and then there will be the conclusion based on that 3 sub-regional consultation, and then the recommendation that we got during that 3 regional consultation. And then the main objective of these 3 consultation was to consolidate the CSO's response and recommendations of action to push back democracy regressions in Asia. And then we also wanted to recommitment, like develop a recommitment to democracy and human rights in Asia on 3 sub-regional consultation. And then we also wanted to share this, the finding in this consultation, this Asia Democracy Assembly. Yeah. And then this consultation details, then so we held on September 10, 11th and 12 in East Asia, South Asia, and Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia on that respectively. And then we have co-organized with this consultation with Forum Asia and the EADF. And then others, the members and partners of this ADN and Forum Asia and EADF invited on that consultation. And that consultation was, each consultation was 2-hour session, and then 1 trigger presentation, and then after, followed by open discussion. And then Southeast Asia, there were approximately 40 participants, and South Asia approximately 30 participants in the sub-regional consultation, and Northeast Asia and Central Asia approximately the 20 participants were participated there. Show next slide. Southeast Asia, then what we found that in the growing democracy, the suppression in Southeast Asia at that time, and then Southeast Asia countries are either obstruct, repressed, and or closed. In terms of the civic space, if you look at the Civicus monitor. And then what we found, the majority of Southeast Asian government continue to wield repressive laws and crack down on civic space. And then there was a kind of the lack of accountability and the failure of ASEAN and ICER in the there. And then COVID-19 exacerbated the HR and democracy situation across the globe. That was also happening in the Southeast Asian context. And then there was also increasing China influence in geopolitics in Southeast Asia. That was the kind of the findings of that consultation. And then CSO has also made a kind of commitment and had a kind of suggestion for remedy. And then that was basically increased multi-stakeholders, the space for collaboration to cope on that situation. And then work to open up media space. There is a kind of sinking space, even media on that region. And civil society alliances to work on the crack in the system that were highlighted by the pandemic. And then increase effective commitment for information sharing between civil society organizations, that we also got a kind of the recommendation and then suggestion there. And then more research data for advocacy, because we do not have that the evidence, so we have to do the research and should collect the evidence for the effective advocacy there. And then increase space for youth, and then increase national level democracy consolidation. That was the CSO commitment and the suggestion there. Sure, next one. And then in the context of South Asia, the South Asian level sub-regional consultation, then what we found, the draconian laws severely oppress basic freedom and shrinking civic space there. And then clear weakening of democratic institution in the South Asia. We got that. However, most of the South Asian government, they follow the periodic democratic elections here. And then increased violence against religious minority and other minorities, and then even human rights defenders and the media actors. And then media freedom in Shaver's declines in the South Asia. Sure, next one. And then CSO commitment and suggestion for the remedy that finding, then that what we discussed during that consultation, more collective action, particularly political mobilization, building capacity among the civil society organizations is necessary there. And then expand advocacy to increase the public and start a movement at the the national levels and in the sub-regional level as well. And collaborative activity on the local, national, and regional level. And then judicial review to confront draconian law. Then the many organizations, they have a kind of the repressive law mapping, and then so it also they felt on that judicial review on that, and then increase capacity of anti-surveillance skill, and then intensify youth engagement in the movement, and then strengthen political parties, more democracy, education, and addressing illiberalism. These are the commitment and suggestions made by the sub-regional consultation. Then while talking about the Northeast Asia and Central Asia, then downward slide in the democracy, and then in gender-based violence, and increase women rights abuses due to the pandemic. And then another underfunded democratic institution fuel on accountability of the government action. And then civic space developments are related to political culture. CSOs are viewed as suspicious in that region. And then increase illiberal influence and increase BRI project there. And then expansion of authoritarian force in the region. Northeast Asia, we got that, and then pandemic and vaccine diplomacy influence geopolitics like other region as well, and then China expand influence in the Northeast Asia. And then CSO's commitment and suggestion after that, the sub-regional consultations we got, deepen understanding of BRI and the influence in the region that is necessary, and then increase work on misinformation, increase protections and security, working on democracy and human rights, and then increase ODA, and then increase evidence-based research to develop policy alternatives like others have written recommendation, and then increase cooperation between Northeast Asia and Central Asian countries to cope on that situation. And then conclusion, then weaken democratic institutions and draconian laws are severely oppressing fundamental freedom and restricting civic space. And then the weaponizations of misinformation is controlling public opinions and empowering democratically elected leaders with authoritarian tendency to oppress freedom, increasing illiberal influence affected regional economies, and geopolitics is enabling for bad region. Civil society organizations continue to respond to the deteriorations of rights, but have a lot more to do and need more thought out modality of that. These are the conclusion. And then recommendation from that the consultation. Increase platforms for multi-stakeholders for like-minded Democrats, and increase intersectionality and break silos, improving coalition. Increase democracy education for all, public, politicians, government, workers, and private sectors as well. And then research on illiberal influence and their effect on democratic governance, economic, and HR. Increase capacity building and strategy to respond to surveillance state and weaponizations of misinformation. And then create effective and swift protection mechanisms for HRD, and then create a space for the youth. These are the recommendations that we summarize after the 3 regional consultations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Devendra, for that very concise conclusion of the sub-regional consultations we did. Next, I will call on our program officer of ADN, Mr. Karel Gianantiano Galang. He will report on the 4 special sessions we did right before the assembly. We felt that we needed more time to focus on very specific crisis that's happening inside the region. So we had separate sessions on Afghanistan, Myanmar, illiberal influences, and the last one was on communities discriminated on work and decent work in democracy and modern slavery. And Karel will go ahead and do that reporting back on what was discussed in the main points. Karel, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Sue, for the introduction. And indeed, ADN did conduct a series of consultations and added series of sessions discussing various topics related to democracy with its partners Forum Asia, AMAN, EADF, and ADRN. And in these sessions, through the month of November, ADN conducted a series of webinars and discussions tackling the very tragic situation in Afghanistan and Myanmar, the discussion of the struggle of marginalized sectors, especially the Dalits, in representation and democratic processes, as well as a special closed session on how illiberal forces are trying to interfere with the democratization processes in the region. With the insights from our distinguished speakers within this fora, we are awakened at the gravity of what needs to be done by various democracy stakeholders to salvage the foundation of democracies and reclaim the civic spaces that were lost, as well as sustain pro-democracy initiatives within the new normal that will come out after this pandemic. So starting with Afghanistan, We have covered aspects of utmost concern, such as the dangerous situation of women and children, the civil society and activists who are now held captive within their own land and are now suffering in fear under the regime of the Taliban. It pains to know that the efforts of the Afghan community in establishing the foundations of a working political process in creating and consolidating an active civil society network and a media to hold those accountable are now neglected and are left at the mercy of an ultra-conservative, bloodthirsty Taliban regime. Our speakers have voiced out disappointment at how intergovernmental institutions have left these sectors in such a tragic state. And indeed, the international community must step up in assisting and reclaiming Afghanistan as a space in which democracy is a way of life. Secondly, another session was also conducted to discuss the insidious attempts by titanic illiberal forces in the region to reshape the international landscape in favor of autocratic actors. We have seen both established and democratizing states fall prey to tactics such as co-opting domestic actors to espouse a liberal agenda, the employment of actors to undermine political process, to mobilizing gigantic amount of economic and diplomatic force to provide a cover for and maintain the control of illiberal regimes. The session points us to the weak underbellies of democracies, and much work needs to be done in order to patch the damage created by this sharp power of these illiberal forces. This include the regional efforts to counter capabilities of these illiberal actors, which should go hand in hand with capacity building of pro-democracy sectors to augment their capacities in raising awareness and responding to these threats. Thirdly, in the session regarding the role of journalists in Myanmar, the current situation, as reported by our esteemed panelists, describe the issues faced by domestic journalists in upholding their duty to ensure a free flow of information and sow the seeds of accountability within Myanmar. The Tatmadaw has a massive arsenal of undemocratic actions, which creates a hostile environment for democracy actors and journalists in the country who are subjected to threats, arrests, torture, harassment, and censorship. The Myanmar civil society and media community are still resisting with creative means. At present, the journalists are utilizing the power of live streams to surface issues, while traditional media have been stepping up and continuously presenting facts and countering the massive propaganda machine of the Tatmadaw. However, with the delicate situation in the country, we do not know until when they can last. The Myanmar civil society laments that while more than 1,000 lives have been claimed by the Tatmadaw, the country is still at a standstill, and the intergovernmental institutions remain to be business as usual, which is very unfortunate, no? And are still conducting cooperative talks with dangerous junta. Let us be reminded that like all autocrats, the Tatmadaw, who has ruled the country for several decades, cannot be reformed. They will continue to invalidate the rights and the will of the Myanmar people, and that the international community must work together in supplying the Myanmar media and civil society with the necessary assistance for them to continue their fight in saving lives and bringing out the truth. And finally, on the last session that we had with regard to the Dalits in South Asia, who are discriminated based on their descent and work, they continue to face injustices on their day-to-day life and have been so for many centuries, from being deprived of land ownership, housing, education, employment, healthcare, and social security, decision-making, media, and often face violence, which includes also cases of abduction, forced conversions, and are often forced into sanitation jobs and manual scavenging. And more gravely, some are not even recognized under special protection measures or policies that are open and are often deprived of taking part in the process of the democracy due to their non-recognition by the state. The presenters provided how Dalits can reap the fruits, provided recommendations on how Dalits can reap the fruits of democracy, which they have fought for, especially in the commitment to an intersectional approach, which includes justice for gender, for financial justice, environmental justice, and due processes, and the recognition of the Dalit sectors. Finally, as a conclusion, what can be done to address these very grave issues that we are facing as a region? The answer is to consolidate, consolidate, and consolidate. And we need the inclusion of vulnerable sectors, such as the youth and marginalized sectors, such as the Dalits, in crucial decision-making processes to ensure that their needs are also resolved. No? Secondly, we need to ensure that people, the advocacies and actions that we are doing are people-centric and intersectional in nature to ensure that we are capturing all aspects that we have to address, and secondly, to make sure that the actions that we are, or the resolutions that we are going to formulate, also respond to the issues that we are also raising. No, thirdly, donors and international intergovernmental organizations should provide for capacity building and empowering efforts to existing civil society sectors. We need to ensure that that our civil society sector within these challenged spaces remains strong and are independent. Next one is we need to build capacities and expand networking within not only our sectors, but also to the various democracy sectors who are yet within our circles. No, we need to connect with the various democracy sectors that we have not cooperated with. And finally, we need to strengthen political and accountability process by providing platforms for civil society to actually participate and meaningfully provide solutions to the challenges that we are facing. So with this, I conclude my presentation, and democracy lives on. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Karel. What a marathon. Thank you for summarizing all of those sessions that we did in the past week and a half. So right before we go into the next plenary, the last plenary of the day, I want to share with you, we've been, of course, there's a lot of countries in the region, unfortunately, under crisis, but the most recent one was Afghanistan. And we wanted to share with you an artist, an Afghani artist wanted to present their song to us, and we wanted to show in solidarity with the Afghani people. So let's see here, if I present to you Afghan artist Hashmat Gulistani. He left his country years ago due to security concern, and he is now settled abroad. But he did this song because, he missed his country. And I'll want to go ahead and share with you.
Hello everybody, my name is Hashmat Palestine and I'm from Afghanistan. Please do help and support the people of Afghanistan and also protect and save lives. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Definitely in solidarity for Afghanistan. We'll go ahead and move on to the next plenary. After we heard the summaries in plenary one, we'll be inviting a group of experts in different sectors in the region to kind of gauge into some of the work that they've been doing, as well as to hear from them on how we can move forward. For that session, it's called the Multi-Stakeholder Perspective on Next Steps to Strengthening Democracy in Asia. The moderator is Itar Supriyadi. I give the floor to you. I kindly ask, because this is a panel discussion, if those who are not speaking on the panel, if we could turn off your video so that we could only see the videos of those on this panel. Thank you in advance. Itar, go ahead.
Thank you, Sue. I come back again. So to proceed these discussions on the multi-stakeholders perspective on the next step to strengthen democracy in Asia, that we expect all the resource persons here will engage in a frank discussions on what should be the priorities to effectively reclaim civic space and ensure a sustainable movement against the deteriorating of the democracy. So here with us, we have 4 resource person or speakers who are very engaged in these processes. And then I would like to first calling maybe to introduce or maybe shows the video. Ms. Maiko Ichihara, he's the academia, he's associate professor from Hitotsubashi University, Japan. Hello, Maiko. Maiko, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. And the second speaker is the CSO and also representing international non-government organizations leaders, Ms. Samini Darsni Kaliamutu. He's the Executive Director of the Forum Asia. Hi, Shamini.
Hi, Achal. Good to be here.
Okay. Nice to see you again, Samini.
Good to see you.
And then to representing media and press sectors, I would like to call Ms. Tess Bakaya. She is the editor-in-chief of the Asia Democracy Chronicles.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Chal.
Hi, Tess. And then last but not least, I think everyone knows him. He's quite long and then very actively engaged in many issues in human rights and democracy, but recently he will be representing the SDG process sectors. Can I call Anselmo Lee as a regional coordinator of the APSD? Hi, Anselmo. Hello, Anselmo.
Good morning, good afternoon.
So I think you are making available from different countries, right? Anselmo from Seoul, Michael from Tokyo, right? And then Shamini from Kuala Lumpur, Tess Bakaya from the Philippines, right? I have a duty to ask to deliver these two questions, and perhaps you can frankly just like a straightforward to responding on this. You listening the presentations that delivered by the previous plenaries regarding the sub-regional situation, recommendation, and also conclusions. Perhaps my question will be addressed along that way, along that line, and expecting your response at that. But I heard Shamini have presentations, right? So I only have two questions. So maybe I can start from asking questions, and then Shamini maybe the letters, so you can answer two questions at the same time. So the first question you'll be the last, and then you will answer the first questions, the second question at the first place. Okay, actually I have a questions. How does your sectors, which is academia, civil society, and international government organizations, media and press, and of course the SDG process, to address the democracy regressions? Maybe I will start from the minority, because we are minority in this forum, Anselmo. Maybe we can start from Anselmo.
Me?
Yeah, we are minority here.
I'm very happy to be a minority, because that shows the woman power, leadership,
Right.
Thank you for inviting me to this historic meeting. Since I'm here with the head of APSD, Asia Civil Society Partnership for Sustainable Development, I'm going to speak from that perspective, so-called SDG perspective. As you know, I hear Shamini from Forum Asia, Human Rights. I'm here technically representing SDG, but this year is the 30th anniversary of Forum Asia, right? So Forum Asia is 30 years old, but ADN, Asia Democracy Network, is only 7 years old, right? ADN was created 2013, okay? And APSD, which I'm representing now, was created 2016, only 5 years ago. What does it mean? The human rights framework has been the main overarching agenda for many civil society organizations since.
Sorry, interruption, Anselmo. Maybe you can speak closer to your microphone, or maybe speak louder.
Can you hear me now? It's okay, better?
Yes, you can, but maybe you can speak louder.
Okay, I will speak louder. And then, as you know, I used to work for Forum Asia before, for 2004, 5, 6. And then I realized, there are many, there's a proliferation of regional civil society organizations, election, corruption, also many issues, but there's no common platform, That's why ADN was created 2013 as a common platform addressing civic space and so democracy. Because without democracy, we civil society, we cannot operate, right? And then we have now new agenda, 2015, UN 2030 agenda, so-called SDG, Sustainable Development, including socio-economic environment. So now we have all the platform, Forum Asia platform, and human rights platform, democracy platform, and then sustainable platform. But now question is how we can consolidate our action. So we have a network, we have an agenda, But question is how to bring different actors together for meaningful action and meaningful impact on the ground. So in this sense, I think the input from the sub-regional and thematic can be the basis for our common action, but we need to strategize, we need to prioritize effectively because there are so many issues today, This year we have the Myanmar, we have Afghanistan, who knows, next year will be Thailand, it can be Philippines, it can be Cambodia. There are here a landmine here and there, So are we prepared, to take, instead of following the issue, every year different issues, I think we need to prepare well in advance. So we have a long-term strategy, and then we need to take immediate action on emerging issues. So in that sense, ADN provide a platform for democracy, but APSD, we use a SDG framework to look at the issue from that perspective. So I hope so this type of multilateral platform, human rights, democracy, and SDG, hopefully we can create the synergy for meaningful change on the ground. Thank you. This is my introductory remark.
All right. Same questions, Michael. How does your sectors address democracy regression?
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Ichal. So the sector I'm covering here is the academia. And I would like to talk about both the positive and negative sides within the academia, especially but not only limited to East Asia. As for the positive side, academia as a whole has been moving towards correcting structural factors of some aspects of domestic human rights violations, such as gender gap and discriminations against foreigners, by expanding the employment of female and international scholars, as well as accepting greater number of international students. This is influenced by their motivation to secure governmental fundings, as well as the intention to increase the reputation of their institutions. This means, first of all, government's efforts to tackle these issues, if there is, do have an impact. But the weakness of such motivation is the issue in the current international society. Secondly, the existence of various international university rankings, such as the QS World University Ranking, motivate universities to take efforts. So ranking institutions could be a good potential target for our advocacy. Efforts to tackle human rights issues by academia do have a positive impact to the entire society. For instance, by expanding the potential female human resources for various sectors, including the state, business, and civil society. In the case of developed countries such as Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, a great number of international students seek jobs in the countries after graduation, which helps bring diversity to their societies. However, there are several concerning moves as well. Here, I would point out two issues. First, changes in the spheres of international security and economy are greatly impacting the structure of the higher education. Digital fields such as cyber, AI, data governance, and cryptocurrency are shaping the current state of warfare and economic transaction, and governments are hurrying to nurture the next generation experts in these areas. This causes government grants to flow into these fields. It raises a concern that the social sciences and humanities, which analyze the normative structure of society and thus are the backbones of liberal democracy, are being weakened. Indeed, there are even discussions in some societies whether it is necessary to maintain social sciences and humanities. Thus, we need to work to secure and maintain the fields of social sciences and humanities for the protection and maintenance of civil liberties, political rights, and the rule of law. Second issue is the increasing state intervention in higher education and academia. While discussions about the regression of the liberal international order and democracy have been still active in the fields of social sciences, there are fears that state intervention in education and academia will become further entrenched in the future. The most serious example is Hong Kong in the case of Asia, where freedom of speech in educational institutions has been taken away, making it impossible to conduct critical analysis, which is an essential component for liberal democracy. In the post-coup Myanmar, schools have been shut down until the beginning of this month as COVID countermeasures. And even after the reopening, the fear of violent attacks has been preventing students from returning to schools. Freedom of speech and expression lacks as well. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, Michael. Next, maybe Tess. Same question. How does the media sectors address democracy regression at the moment?
Sorry. Yeah, I was unmuting. Hi, everyone. I would put the responses basically using 3 C's. Okay, the letter C. One response was in terms of courage. We know of media, journalists in particular across Asia, especially where there's severe crackdown on journalists, stepping up to the challenge, coming up with stories, for example, that otherwise are very risky to do. So we find that very courageous. I mean, of course, this is not just happening in the context of the pandemic, but I think it's been it's become even more evident, you know, in the midst of media, for example, not having social protections, not being provided with PPE, but still being expected to go out, cover the field, and come up with stories that are particularly more important these days. So I see that as one indication of how media, many, well, not the entire media, of course, but many journalists have really been, you know, though very mindful of the risks to their physical well-being, their lives, the risks of legal repression, for example, are still going about their, you know, their jobs and coming up with stories that are so vital for the public to know. So courage is one. And then, but on the less positive side, or I would say the negative side, we see, and this is not just happening, of course, in the context of today's crisis, we see media, some segments at least, being co-opted by political and economic elites. So that's another C, the co-optation of the media in the midst of, you know, the democratic regression in our society, in the midst of steadily declining revenue that makes it difficult for the media to sustain operations. I think for many, and in the face of, you know, unrelenting clampdown on the media, we see this happening. Drawing on my experience as editor-in-chief of Asia Democracy Chronicles, we have a story, for example, on a group of alternative media banding themselves, coming together because the media coverage has been stifling minority voices. So what does this mean? You know, in terms of the co-optation I'm talking about, just when people expect the media to provide that platform for voices, including minority voices, marginalized voices being heard, it's not happening. We also see as this is not a deliberate response, but because of the very repressive environment in which the media operate today, many media outlets, journalists are being cowed, and that's another C, into silence. Others are not being entirely silenced, but they are resorting to self-censorship. So very important stories that need to be brought out are not being published because and the media doesn't even have to wait for authorities to tell them, don't publish this story. They just need to feel, you know, that fear that prevents them from putting out those stories. So that's a clear indication of media being cowed into silence. So those are indications of how the media, and this is not, of course, unique to Asia, but this is happening in other parts of the globe. But day in and day out, even as we continue, for example, running ADC, Asia Democracy Chronicles, we see this happening. But I'm emboldened to see because we continue to get proposals, pitches from journalists, pitching stories that I know for a fact are not only expensive to cover, and we don't have the money to give them, to cover their travels, for example, proposing stories that are difficult to do. So that to me is very emboldening. But the responses have not been entirely positive, but they are they're cause for reflection at the very least. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
All right. Now I will hand out to Samini, because you having presentation, and I believe your presentation covered these two questions, right? So maybe I need to read the second question first that we need to address together. Second question, actually, what shall we do forward to break away all the obstacle we have among us, and then moving forwards into actions, like what Anselmo said in the beginnings. So perhaps Samini can address those two questions. First, how does your human rights sectors or NGO sectors can address democracy regulation? And secondly, what shall we do? You have presentation with you, right? Or
thanks, HL. I think Sue is helping me with flashing the presentation.
Sure, hold on a second.
Thank you. And as that's being sorted out, I just want to, take the opportunity to thank, ADN for inviting me to be a part of this panel, and thank you also for the amazing opening, as well as and the amazing first panel as well. I think there was some really rich discussions there, and thank you. It's for plenary too. It's a pleasure to be among such eminent speakers as well. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Sue, for that. We can move to the next slide, please. So I'm going to go a little bit backwards and talk about the operational context of that, or the space that civil society actors have been operating in. We heard from the opening session, and as well as from the first plenary, about how the space for civil society to operate has been shrinking and shrinking even further because of authoritarianism, and because of measures introduced purportedly to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. What we've seen is the increasing authoritarianism across Asia in recent years has directly affected democracy and civic space, and also pro-democracy actors and human rights CSOs have been subject to consistent harassment and constraints on their activities. The COVID-19 pandemic we've seen has further dealt a blow to fundamental freedoms. Governments are justifying the use of repressive laws and measures, expanding control over physical and online spaces as well. Further, we've also seen how societal and institutional weaknesses that hinder the growth of democracy in the first place has persisted. This has, materialized in terms of gender-based discrimination and violence, socioeconomic inequalities, extremism, religious majoritarianism, etc. Next slide, please. What we've also seen is, despite the risks of reprisals to human rights defenders and civil society actors, CSOs have continued to highlight issues related to the abuse of power, violation of human rights, weakening of democratic and independent institutions, including, as we heard from Tess, of the media, and as well as the judiciary. So I'm splitting this into two parts. At the national level, how CSOs have responded to the challenges have been to facilitate or incubate movements across sectors. And this has, we have seen a participation across different sectors, including the human rights sector, actors working in the anti-corruption space, and as well as the gender space. Gathering of data on human rights and human rights violations to fundamental freedoms, and raising concerns with key stakeholders to encourage accountability and change. This is where civil society organizations have been placing their emphasis on. At the global level, how CSOs have responded to challenges has also been to counter attempts to curtail independence of international human rights mechanisms. This is, for example, pertaining to the UN Special Procedure mechanisms, and also CSOs have been placing key issues on the global agenda. And this includes something we heard from Karel around the special sessions that were had in the lead up to the Democracy Assembly, and some of these issues that CSOs have been highlighting at the international space have been on the marginalization of ethnic and religious minorities, and also on how disinformation is being weaponized to further authoritarian political agenda. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are some of the strengths and good practices that we have logged as part of our work at Forum Asia. Civil society stakeholders have developed and are developing a good understanding of challenges to achieving democratic societies and institutional weaknesses that exist to address them. And despite repression, the creation and strengthening of inter-regional alliances, creating platforms to provide solidarity and support for one another's causes are increasing. And one area where we've seen this is through the Milk Tea Alliance. The creation of platforms for solidarity and speaking out for one another's causes, such as what the Milk Tea Alliance has been doing, is mobilizing solidarity across countries in Asia and beyond. When we talk about issues of Myanmar, the Myanmar coup, for example, and of Thailand's repression of opinion and assembly. A third strength or good practice is in terms of collaborative advocacy. This is where we collaborate again across sectors and across actors to create an enabling environment for civil society to work safely. The example I would like to share with you is on Mongolia's law on the legal status of human rights defenders. This was a culmination of combined efforts of civil society organizations, defenders, and other stakeholders, including the National Human Rights Commission of Mongolia. And Mongolia enacted this landmark legislation as the first of its kind in Asia, serving as a good practice for the region. And the last point on this slide, collaborative advocacy also creates institutional change. Thank you. Next slide, please. These are some of the ongoing challenges facing civil society organizations across Asia, where we see stakeholders having varying levels of expertise on the impact of emerging challenges. We heard in earlier sessions about China and the BRI project. We heard of the dwindling power of the perceived dwindling of power of the United States in the region because of China's rise. And some of these challenges to the region are unique and growing, and there is a need to understand how this impacts human rights and development challenges that we face as a region, including climate crisis, mass migration, the business and human rights nexus, technology, artificial intelligence. There is much more we need to learn in terms of the issues that impact our region. Another ongoing challenge is the lack of enabling environment, draconian laws, insufficient protection of human rights defenders, weakened institutions. These are often echoed themes of how they, they impact the human rights and democratic spaces in the region. And finally, an ongoing challenge is in the lack of financial resources, where sometimes donor priorities do not completely match the needs of people on the ground. I have two more slides, if you'll bear with me. Next slide, please. How do we address the challenges, these challenges that I've laid before you at the institutional level? One idea that we would like to share is the encouragement of judicial reviews of government's actions and or to confront draconian laws and the strengthening of independent oversight institutions, including, or for example, the NHRIs. Another way to address a challenge here is in terms of holding social media companies to account. This can be done through judicial or legislative actions, even through dialogues with these social media companies, to not just counter the spread of disinformation, but to really understand how disinformation affects and impacts them and basically curtails democracy. A bottom-up approach is also needed in terms of strengthening the capacity of grassroots organizations and movements to create change at the community level and sustainable social transformation. Further, reforms to election financing, removing corporate influence from the political process, countering corporate capture, are all important aspects that we need to explore together across the different stakeholders. Next slide, please. I'll skip the last couple of points because I have a feeling I might be out of time. Okay, and finally, how do we increase our collaboration? We've already heard about how increased collaboration across the different stakeholders and across the different sectors can actually lead to bigger impact. And that's what I'd like to also emphasize today, that collaboration between varied civil society elements to fill in the gaps of understanding between different stakeholders is also important if we want to push back on for democratic reforms. Collaboration between CSOs and academia to strengthen evidence-based advocacy is another idea, and I'm glad that Michael is in the plenary with me, and perhaps we could, also chat later about how we want to do this. Also, a third idea is in the increase in multi-sector collaboration on the advocacy component. I shared with you the Mongolia example earlier, and that was a success story that we would love to see replicated throughout Asia, especially in areas where there are such threats to democracy and human rights. And finally, establishing inclusive spaces for knowledge sharing sessions as well on the different subjects that we all work on. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll pass the floor back to Ichal. Thank you.
Thanks, Shamini, to answer marathonly, right? 2 questions. That all makes sense. That reflected to the presentation to addressing the questions. So I think I have to inform the secretariat. I think I need like 10 to 15 minutes beyond the times to accommodating comment from the rest of the speakers, and maybe a couple of minutes if somebody wanted to make interventions. So Anselmo, back to Anselmo. You are the most senior here with the vast experience. So I guess you got more clear what shall we do forward to break away the obstacle within us and to moving forward toward the action. Anselmo, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Shamini. I think it's an excellent presentation. Very good summary of all the issues and challenges, and like a menu, what kind of action we can take, So I want to pick up some of the issues you already presented. One is you mentioned about business and human rights nexus, Because traditionally, when you say democracy, we tend to focus on political, right? The government. But today, you mentioned also about the corporate capture, Who really run the politics? It's not the politician we see in the stage, but people behind who has economic power. In this sense, I think we need to pay more attention to role of private sector, For instance, the Myanmar campaign, of course, we did a lot of pressure the Myanmar government, but at the same time, group of civil society actors, they focus on transnational corporations. So I think that strategy is very, very important to increase the impact of our advocacy. So, and then last one is more. I think we have done a lot of networking and coalition building among ourselves. But now, question how to reach out. How to create a broader alliance. I think the ADN has been playing this role, but we have to do more. Effectively with our parliamentarians, both the national and the local parliamentarians. I think they play the key role, So that way we build democracy from below, Of course, we have to put pressure from global, top down pressure, but we have to bottom up both process. I think in that sense, I think we need to very good coordinated strategies, especially among human rights groups. Forum Asia is a human rights platform. ADN is a democracy platform. I'm also facilitating SDG platform. If these three platforms come together, I believe we can have a more sustainable impact on the ground. Thank you.
So I got idea now, but later on we discuss about that after more. Yes, maybe Michael, responding to the same question.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Ichal. And also, well, I do echo Shamini's point about the collaborations that we can talk later. So then, in response to the weakening of democratic norms internationally, the avalanche of serious democratic regression phenomena may continue in Asia and around the world. The number of refugees could skyrocket if more regions, in addition to Hong Kong, Myanmar, and Afghanistan, become unable to ensure freedom and security for their people. Academia will need to take action to prepare for this, both in terms of research and real-world actions, I believe. First, let me focus on the research side. There is a need to expand research on measures with which to overcome sovereignty norms and nationalism in order to defend democracy and human rights, as well as to provide assistance when serious human rights violations occur or refugees arise abroad. In academia, there is an aversion to policy-oriented research, however, and a high value is placed on purely academic research. This is partly because the value of research is measured by the ability to publish one's research in journals with a high impact factor, which is given only to purely academic journals. The value of each university is also measured in conjunction with this evaluation system, and the employment, salary, and promotion of researchers are all determined by this. As a result, there is no incentive mechanism for academia as a whole to conduct policy-oriented research. As the international order changes drastically and the need to halt the weakening of liberalism increases, the role of the think tank function of academic institutions is ever increasing. In order for academic institutions to expand these functions and encourage policy-oriented research, it is necessary to diversify the indicators for measuring the value of research. In addition to measuring the value from the perspective of the impact factor, non-academic publications, and the amount of collaboration with government, civil society, and so on need to be added to the measurement. In addition, in Asia in particular, there are many cases where publications in English have limited impact on the audience in the home country. Thus, indicators to evaluate publications in native languages are needed as well. Academic associations internationally should reconsider evaluation mechanisms for research. In addition to such research side, secondly, academia in Asia should expand its actions in the real world in collaboration with grant-making foundations and NGOs. In particular, we can play a significant role in the acceptance of scholars and activists at risk, as well as refugees. Many of us in the civil society urged our governments this year to accept refugees at the time of the coup in Myanmar and the return of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. This did not work in many cases, and we bitterly regretted not being able to help our friends in danger. On the one hand, we need to continue to persuade our governments to change their policies to proactively accept refugees and protect democracy abroad. On the other hand, Asian academics need to expand their own actions as well. For example, there is an international network called Scholars at Risk, whose member institutions accept scholars who face repression abroad in order to help and protect them. Embarrassingly, however, with the sole exception of the American University of Central Asia in Kyrgyzstan, There is currently no Asian academic institution among its members. We need to take this fact seriously. In reality, scholars have a considerable degree of discretion in accepting people. We can invite visiting scholars to our universities and think tanks, or we can accept non-degree research students. If we can collaborate with various foundations to secure the necessary funds, we can accept people who are facing crisis and provide them a temporary refuge at our academic institutions. In order to do this, it is also necessary to share information about who specifically needs to evacuate and which institution have available positions. Thus, I would like to advocate the formation of such an information sharing network among academic institutions and NGOs in Asia, as well as grant-making foundations all over the world, for the creation of a framework for mutual assistance. I'm willing to set up a secretariat if necessary, so I would like to ask for cooperation from foundations, NGOs, and academics. Thanks. And that's it for me.
That sounds like proposal, right? Michael. All right. So let's hear the same questions. I mean, the answer from Tess Bakaya, same question. What shall we do forward? Because the media is sectors that's not representing in any regional or sub-regional organization, but at the same time, media also having the courage right now with the Nobel Peace Prize that given to the media actors from the Philippines. So I think it's very critical to hear your response, Tess. And then maybe after Tess giving answers, I would like to invite maybe each 1 minute each of you to make final comments before we are wrapping up and then return back to the secretariat. So Tess, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. I find it very interesting that terms like collective action, further engagement have been mentioned a number of times in the course of this meeting. And I thought this was something that I wanted to highlight, prior to joining the meeting. The need for more collaboration, the need to forge solidarity between the media and some CSOs, for example, because and already it's already being done some place in Asia. For example, there's Tempo Media. I'm sure Ichal is familiar with this. Their engagement, their collaboration with some CSOs in Indonesia have allowed them to produce more compelling stories. And personally, this is something I wanted to see happen in our region. This more because there's a lot of collaboration happening among CSOs, but where CSOs and media are involved, I'm not sure there's much effort along these lines. So moving forward, I think this is something that is worth exploring, because we have some shared challenges. For example, we have some shared objectives at the same time. So what are the points for convergence, for collaboration? For example, even academic institutions, Michael highlighted the important work that academic institutions are doing. You have a lot of data, you have a lot of, research initiatives are ongoing, but how much of this is being used and being made public, for example, to make the public aware of important issues? And at this time, there's a lot of there's a great tendency among some media outlets to resort, for example, to clickbait headlines, to sensational stories, if only to generate more eyeballs, more income. But this does not necessarily translate to to better and deeper discourse among the public. So where can we come together, CSOs and media organizations? The media in many ways do not wear their advocacy on their sleeve. We don't openly advocate, but through our stories, we can influence policy change, for example. But we need information. We need verifiable data that could come from CSO groups, from academic institutions. So where can we come together? So that's something I personally want to see explored, and maybe some groups could facilitate this. Because at this time, the issues confronting individual countries are not unique to them. There are many cross-border issues, migrant labor, for example. So we can create better stories, for example, if we're able to engage with even academic institutions, with civil society organizations. So moving forward, this is something that I think at the very least is worth exploring, among other potential efforts to address the issues we're talking about in terms of democratic regression, etc. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tess. Maybe last comment, 1 minute each from all the speakers. Of course, tomorrow we're going to have like a breakout groups that need to discuss deeper what next to do. But maybe if you can placing foundations that we can carry forward tomorrow, or some comments within 1 minute, it will be appreciated. Again, maybe start from Anselmo.
It's me again. Okay,
Yeah.
this is also the opportunity. Since we are discussing something very concrete, I think I like this idea, Michael. We need to have a different initiative and then networking. The Karel said the two keywords, consolidate 3 times and connect 3 times, right? That's what Karel said. But I would say organize and action, because we need to have a very strong organizational base for sustainable action, Otherwise, of course, we can have an ad hoc meeting, that's okay. But, to have a real impact on the ground, we need to have a long-term strategies. For that, we need to have a strong organizational basis, So for that, I think we need to have in terms of strategic planning, Forum Asia, you have an annual action plan, right? ADN has an action plan, all the different NGO has an action plan, but I don't think we have a very good consolidated joint action plan, The taking into account the many sectors. For instance, we have a MFA, migration, and the peace group. I think this will be a daunting challenge, but I think it's worthwhile and it's a must, to have a real impact on the ground, very good strategic action plan in advance so that we can have a coordinated action on the ground. That is my contribution. Thank you.
Nico?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Ichal, and thank you very much, Sue, and everybody at ADN for conveying this much-needed event. Obstacles for liberal democracy includes not only immediate repression, but also structural factors. And especially in Asia, where the sovereignty norm is so strong, non-governmental actors have greater hope for change. So I'm looking forward to further collaboration with the civil society, NGOs, media, and grant-making foundations, and everybody in Asia. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shamini.
Thanks very much, Ichal. And I do apologize if anybody had seen me reacting a little bit earlier, a grasshopper landed on my hand. Okay, so basically, I would like to also extend my thanks to the organizers for inviting me to be a part of this. I have completely and thoroughly enjoyed the discussion with the speakers here. Just one point to sum up that I will address William's question on chat. I do think that the idea of regulating social media spaces might not be the answer, because there is a space for freedom of expression and opinion as well using social media. I think what is important there is to see how do we facilitate the space for openly expressing opinions and thoughts, while also respecting the power that we have when we do that, and also at the same time countering, I think, the more the more serious issue of disinformation and misinformation. So that is a delicate balance that I think a lot of many civil society organizations, including Forum Asia, are already working on. And I think that when Salmo's suggestion does take place, and we do collaborate and coordinate across our organizations to be able to come up with a work plan, that could be an idea that could feed into that. Thank you.
Okay, Tess?
Maybe I'll just give a quick response to the comment by Gus. Media has traditionally been tools of our advocacy, but perhaps should now be more targets, if not platforms. Consider us partners, not tools. And then, let's explore engagements in terms of, the information that you could share with us and that we could turn into compelling, meaningful stories. Which brings me to say also on a quick point, as much as nobody wanted COVID to happen and we want it to end soon enough, we wanted it to end yesterday, it's also an opportunity for us to rethink, how we do our work, our mindsets. Among others, for example, how do we see the media and the work that it's doing? In the midst of these challenges, is there a need to recalibrate, for example? And the same thing could apply to CSO. So I personally welcome this dialogue, and I'm grateful to ADN for the invitation. But I'm hoping that moving forward, the things we've discussed could, at least some of them, could translate into more concrete action, so that we can't be harping on the same things the next time around. We need to be seeing more well thought out actions, for example, that are responsive to the situation confronting us today. Thank you.
Thank you, all the speaker resource persons, for the input and also comments. Actually, January and February is a good timing, to planning, because all organizations making the plans around that month. But I don't want to promise things, because a lot of the component we need to contact it and agree upon if we gathering and then consolidating all the civil society action plan. Some maybe might not be available due to the security and safety, but then again, we try to keep pursuing, and then we agree next time we should not our conversation should not again talking about what way forward, but then again should be more in the action plans. Thank you. It is wonderful sessions, and then again, brilliant contributions, and I hope everybody will still attending tomorrow, and then also can contributing in the breakout sessions. So I return back to you.
Yes, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Anselmo. Thank you, Tess. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Shamini. That was such a great discussion. It really got me excited. The chat box is, everyone's talking about reviving SAP, all these great things to come, and it got me really, really excited and I really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you again. Just wanted to share some of the feedback that we got from the floor. Remember, I shared with you that menti.com got some suggestions or asked this question to the floor. We got 3 replies. In the time of democracy regression, how do we move on from only assessing these challenges and into direct action? What are your suggestions? We want to hear from you. We got cultivate allies from policymakers, reach more people and gathering new ideas, and criticism on the UN, and how we could even go beyond the UN and make it more effective. I think pretty much a lot of the things that the speakers have touched upon. So thank you, everyone. We went a little bit over time, but I think it was perfect. We hope that you come back tomorrow. We start again tomorrow at 4 p.m. Korea Standard Time, which is 12:30 India, 12:45 Nepal, 2 o'clock Bangkok, because I get a lot of emails about this, 3 o'clock Manila, and again 4 o'clock in Korea. So we'll hope to see you here tomorrow. We'll have the breakout sessions. Have a good evening and see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, everyone. And thanks for
Bye-bye.
participating.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
No photo, no solidarity
Oh.
photo with the
Oh,
Myanmar.
yes. Oh, sorry. Good
You need to
point.
take one.
Solidarity photo. Yes, everyone, please open your participants.
Real fingers.
Till the end. Thank you so much.
Or a finger,
Yes.
2 finger.
2 or 3? 3.
Oh, right. Oh, this one.
Which one?
Wow, Karel, we have a
Sarah.
please take one.
Next.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.